on a number of core key performance indicators. And we track those key performance indicators over time. What is the beauty of these? The beauty is that managing on your set of your portfolio, you know that in the long term, you are committing to these core KPIs, you are committing to these deliverables. In the long term, you are committing to impact in some way or another. These core KPIs match over education, over entrepreneurship, and over innovation, which are the key agendas for the activities of the KIC. And over time, both the EIT and the KICs manage how you are achieving your key performance indicators and how the EIT is drilling impact over innovation in Europe. That's the way we do it. The final message, I think, is terribly important, is how can we make this happen, keeping the KICs as diverse as they need to be? We're talking about knowledge and innovation communities. We don't want standardized models of innovation. What we do want, and let me tell you, I will not tell you which curve is from which KIC, but you have there a matching based on proxy indicators of the 3 different KICs and how they manage their portfolio and how they deliver their KPIs. And you can see that they are different, definitely. They have different strategies. One can invest more in talent. The other can invest much more in new ventures or the growth of existing business. The other can better focus first on skills and bridge these skills into what will be the final new ventures. What I want to tell you, and that's the final key message, the important thing is you, as a KIC, manage your innovation portfolio as long as you keep it sustainable, because it's your KIC. And the EIT manages this diversity and amplifies this diversity because it's in the interest of the EIT to push diversity, to push entrepreneurship ideas, to drive innovation differently, to drive it uniquely. And so we are witnessing now, these are numbers coming from the initial years of the 3 existing KICs, that yes, they are different, but they are coping with this long-term vision, reaching and achieving impact. Thank you.
I thought that was, oops, apologies, I thought that was extremely interesting. I have a question. I mean, you were right to emphasize sort of the long-term nature of the involvement with the KICs, and you had this very interesting chart going from startup to growing up, etc. The KICs have now been going, what, 3 years almost?
Yes.
Where are they on your chart? Do you still consider these startups, or are these now mature organizations?
At the very crossroads of growing up. So they finished their startup, and they're at the very crossroads of growing up, but they can tell you much better than I can.
Okay, so they're sort of
very crossroads of growing up.
In puberty or so.
Puberty, yes, definitely.
Okay,
we'll support that.
Very interesting. Maybe later in the debate you can also explain the difference between talent and skills, but because I didn't quite get that. But it's very interesting. And also the different performance, that chart that you had in the end. So I'm sure we'll hear much more about that. Now, our next speaker is Daniel Zimmer, Innovation Director at the Climate KIC. Daniel, you're in charge of developing and supervising the implementation of your KIC's innovation project activities in areas as diverse as land, water, resource efficiency. And I know that previously you also have experience with leading nonprofits such as the World Water Council. Against this backdrop, we are naturally very interested to hear your insights on innovative project portfolios. Go ahead.
Good afternoon. Thank you very much. I will not go through a description of our entire portfolio. We have had some examples already provided this morning by Ian Short in his talk. Now, what I would like this afternoon is to highlight 4 important tensions and maybe challenges we are facing in developing our portfolio of innovation. This is just a sort of experience after 3 years of trying to build these strange animals that are the KICs. And so the first tension that we are facing is to find a right balance between technology push and market-driven innovation. How do we try to strike this balance? And this is especially important in our KIC because, as you were told this morning, the markets are not yet there, and so we would be tempted to start to be more technology push because it seems much easier to start from what we know and to try to bring the knowledge to the market. In fact, we are convinced that we need to also work toward the market and to find this right balance, and we have two important tools that we have developed to do this. One is what we call our Pathfinder projects, which explore the markets, but also explore potential business models for different products that we could potentially develop. The other tool that we have developed is our Climate Market Accelerator, where we purposely try to create demand and market for different products or identify which products are really of the interest of potential customers. One example of this is what we do on public procurement, where indeed a number of rules of city authorities can be shaped in order to facilitate the deployment of innovation. The second important challenge that we faced is what balance between top-down, more strategic directions we take in shaping our agenda and what more creative bottom-up approaches we use to do this. In innovation, we need obviously some bottom-up approaches. We need to grow many types of flowers and see what are the good ones before picking the most interesting ones to develop them. But we also need, and especially again in our case, we need to focus and to have very strategic directions because climate change is nowhere and everywhere. Every economic activity can be impacted by climate change, and one of our difficulties has really been to focus and to define strategic priorities. So the response we have given to this challenge is our platform, strategic and challenge platforms, where we try to indeed find the right directions, but also to create sub-communities which will grow a number of nice flowers in the strategic directions identified. So we called our platforms our landscape gardeners. They just give us the type of landscape we are looking for, but then we will need to have a lot of bottom-up initiatives that will create the nice flowers we will select for innovation. The third tension is about articulating short-term and medium-term or longer-term processes. In other words, also how to find the right level of flexibility. It was said before, we need some flexibility, and it's the only way we can do, and we need to have flexibility in the way we select, but also in the way we implement our projects. For instance, the initial project plans, when we develop a new activity, need to evolve regularly. We are not FP7 type of projects where you know for three years what you will be doing. You need to be able to evolve and to take account of the first results that you obtain with your project in order to make it successful in a business environment. So here we need also to have some stability, because project teams, they also need to know where they are going. They need to know that they will get resources, and so they cannot just adapt constantly to changing rules. So this is, again, finding the right balance is very tricky, but also very important. And I have to say we are still looking for the right model here to address this important challenge. The last important challenge we are and have been facing so far is to find the right mix between open innovation approaches and more classical innovation approaches. We are building a community and we want to share knowledge as much as possible, but obviously if you want to develop business, you need at some point to have IP on which you can earn your money. So here the response is also a bit tricky, but we try to find the right combination. And one response we have found at the moment is to develop new types of projects that we call innovation aggregators, where we have a sort of kernel where a number of partners share information, share their knowledge, and this kernel is developed even in a sort of non-for-profit company on which a number of modules for which the kernel provides interoperability on which these modules are plugged onto. So this is a type of project which combines at the center sort of open innovation approach with more commercial, more classical innovation and commercial modules in order to work together and develop the spirit of the KIC. So these are the 4 important tensions I wanted to stress in introducing this session. We are still far from managing all them perfectly, and I think that this is a collective effort that needs to be taken seriously on board by the different KICs. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Daniel. I think, first of all, I applaud you for talking about the tensions, because maybe up until now we sort of had the impression, oh, these KICs, everything, is wonderful, it all works without problems. But you are right to point out, that there is tension between open and closed innovation systems, between competition and collaboration, etc. So I'm very grateful that you say that. Can you just, because you mentioned this tension between open and what you call traditional modes of innovation, how do you overcome that? Because that strikes me as really a formidable challenge.
Well, again, I give one example, and we are trying to go as far as we can with sharing knowledge. And this is, of course, not easy, and it depends very much on the areas you have. If you work with more academic, for instance, people, it's easier in general to share knowledge because it's more with the culture. So it's also finding the right partnerships and the right consortia for projects. But we have also private partners who are ready to share because they are not necessarily already engaged in the different sectors, and they are also exploring different opportunities. And in that case, we can put them together. In the case, the project I mentioned is a project that is developed with insurance companies, for instance, where there is apparently willingness to share at least a minimum set of information partners.
Well, because you would think, climate change is an issue so huge, that even companies have really an interest to tackle it collectively. Now, our next speaker is Stan Smits. He may look very familiar to you because he, of course, spoke in the previous session. But Stan, you're, of course, such a valued member of this community that we also asked you to speak on this topic. Sure. The floor is yours.
Well, it means that we are very frugal with our resources at central level. May I have the... What I wanted to do is talk you a little bit through some of the practicalities. In fact, I mentioned in my, my earlier presentation when we laid out a little bit of the financial framework that we are using in EIT ICT labs, and that is to focus on the project portfolio management. The first slide will be familiar. That's the one that I showed before. That's the model that we are using, the carrier catalyst model. So the carrier is basically the complementary activities, as Alexander just explained as well, while the catalyst is the other part that is either funded fully from EIT funding or also receives some of the co-funding. And then everything is resulting in this specific innovation objective. As I mentioned before, the catalyst is of course very important, and if we want to make sure that we get projects that we can really, let's say, shape in a particular way, there is some part that you have to do top-down and another part that you have to do bottom-up. So bottom-up, we have to call for proposals, as we call it, where we go out to our partnership in order to collect ideas for those specific innovation objectives. Top-down, what we do is to say, well, this is the structure in which we want, in particular, to organize the catalysts. And this slide shows those, at least the catalysts that we are using. There are a number of common catalysts, as we call them, that are like the co-location centers, the co-location center mobility program. And then we have a number of catalysts that are very specific, either for education, for research, or business. So for business, you have things like business modeling. If you have a particular technology, how are you going to bring that to the market? What type of business model will be applied to it? Strategic coaching. If you have a PhD student that has developed a particular technology, how can you coach him in order to become an entrepreneur? Access to finance, supporting in that area. In the research side, we also have a number of those examples like technology experimentation, open source booster, standards booster, areas that are very important. And finally, in education, a number of additional catalysts. So that is the set from which our partners are allowed to choose what they want to use. I showed before a slide which was kind of conceptual slide how this looks like, and I've taken one of the slides for 2013 for this year that is developed for cyber physical systems, or maybe some of you know that as embedded software, where you see those boxes filled in, where you have, for instance, on the right bottom side, the various projects. Many of them are very specific, like FP7 projects, some others are company specific. You see that in this particular case, Experience in Living Labs, open source booster is used, and then it is indicated what the contribution will be to the KPIs. I think Alexander also mentioned the importance, and I know that our CEOs are going to talk a lot about the KPIs in the next session, how those KPIs are contributing to the overall objectives. And then finally, what we call the action line. An action line is a kind of segment. What is the outcome? So an extension of a test bed, a demonstrator, a method for tools, a summer school, reference architecture. So that are the type of tangible deliverables that come out of such a program. So this is an example, and this is used also by what we call the action line leaders in order to shape what we call the call for proposals. So we have about 9 action lines that go out, make a document in which they describe what they would like to achieve for that year in rather rough terms, and then they collect the input from the partners. And the partners basically use a kind of bottom-up model by which they can, let's say, input their proposals into our systems so that we can, let's say, review it. It contains all the information that we need to collect about an activity, who is doing it, who is the lead partner, is it the continuation of last year, etc. And then, and don't look at the text, it's just a joke part. It's really to collect all the information that you need to have about a particular topic. This is for what is called the KIC activity, because the whole concept is pretty complex, and this is at the KIC activity level. Similarly, we collect the information for what we call the business plan, the business proposition. So how does this activity fit in the overall business? And we collect that information. And finally, what we collect is what we call the catalysts work plan, which some of you may have heard here as this funny acronym CAVA. that is collected in that particular sense. So that's in a nutshell the way that we top-down with catalysts and with action lines and with, let's say, guidance, define the playing field, and then bottom-up collect the information from the various partners. Thank you.
Sent you here twice for a reason, because it was actually very interesting, this interplay between bottom-up and top-down, etc. I have one question. Looking at your slide with all the partners, just out of curiosity, and excuse my own ignorance, but it strikes me particularly in the area of ICT, Europe's not really a leader in many areas here. Do you collaborate internationally with some of the leading companies in that field or leading research institutes in that field?
Well, first of all, I think it is important to realize that ICT is not just focused on operating systems or PCs or whatever, which is typically what people consider ICT. If you look at ICT from an embedded perspective, and I can tell you that when I had discussions at the CEO at Philips management level, our CEO was not really thinking that there was any software engineer in the organization, and I had to keep him out of his dream and tell him that he had probably around 8,000 to 9,000 software engineers running around in developing embedded software. The same is true in the car manufacturing. The same is true in all the other industries. So I think claiming that Europe is not playing an important role in ICT, I think is not correct. However, it is in a different domain that we operate. So that's the first part to the question. So and therefore also the action lines that we have selected are all focused in areas in which Europe is strong. When we made the call for proposal in 2009, we identified 6 areas in which Europe is very advanced compared to the United States.
Can you give 1 or 2 examples?
In healthcare.
Healthcare, okay.
Yeah. If you look at, well, again, with companies like Siemens, like Philips, in the domain of image processing for imaging systems, we are very advanced. I think in the car industry as well, if you look what is happening in the car industry with BMW, Audi, Fiat, etc. I mean, there's a lot going on. So those areas we have identified. If you look at the telecom industry, like Nokia, Ericsson, they are very much in that space. Now, that does not mean that we are not, let's say, involving other partners. So in particular, at the moment, Intel has been one of our associate partners from the start. We are currently working on a proposal from one of the countries to create a node in London, where IBM will be part of. So we definitely involve the, let's say, traditional, if I may use that word, the traditional ICT players as well in our environment.
It I mean, it was really just a question out of curiosity, so thank you for answering it. Finally, we will hear from Anne Lorenz, Chief Operations Officer at the Energy KIC. Anne, you hold a degree in public administration from Konstanz University and previously worked as a project manager at the Karlsruhe Institute of Technology. So something tells me that maybe you're a former colleague of Carl Friedrich Zigan. Yes. Now, in your work at Energy, you're responsible for managing the portfolio and overall activities of the company. Sounds very exciting, very promising. The floor is yours.
Good evening. Being the last speaker has the advantage or disadvantage that many of the points that I wanted to make have already been raised. Has the advantage that I will stay well below the 7 minutes. The messages that I would like to get across with respect to achieving impact through an innovative project portfolio is first about what Alex has referred to as the rebooting, the change in mindset. I would go even one step further. Maybe it's not rebooting, it's formatting and reinstalling. Because this is not about turning money into knowledge, which is research. It's about turning knowledge into money, which is innovation. And then how do you achieve that? a good starting point, if it's about money, is a business case. So this is the first thing to start with. Strategy, where do you think the business cases are? And then select on those. Select with the people which are knowledgeable about it. That means involve the industry partners. Involve, in the case of KICs, also the people which work with entrepreneurs, which are knowledgeable about identifying and finding and building business cases as well. And then manage. Manage upon numbers. Yeah. Measure. Apply stage gate model. That's what we do in KICs. So if there's no performance or the market is not there or no longer there, then the activity is not continued. And the third point, these principles not only apply to technology projects, they also apply to business creation services and to education. Thank you.
Wow, okay. Well done. Well, you mentioned, I was actually intrigued when you say if the market is not there, we discontinue projects. Can you give an example? Because that's very innovative. And who determines, I mean, if there's no market? I mean, is it that they don't have commercial success, or how is that done?
Well, then, in the end, there needs to be someone that pays for the results of the activity. And if there is no need, or if there's no one willing to pay, then there is little use in continuing the activity, because it will not achieve impact, and will not contribute to the sustainability of KICs. And how is it operationalized? I will take the example of what is internally called innovation projects, so the technology part of it. There is at the beginning of each project a feasibility study in which you establish what is the product, what are the specifications, who is the customer, what does the market look like. You build the project upon that, and then there's an assessment. And the assessment is carried out by the knowledgeable people within our partnership. And if the conclusion is that there is no impact foreseen, then the project is stopped.
And Anna, I have to say, knowing you for 5 minutes, I have no doubt that you will start. You don't deem it worthwhile. With that, anyone wanting to enter the debate? Questions, comments? The gentleman over here, please. Please introduce yourself.
Okay, thank you very much. My name is Gary Logan. I work for the Department for Business Innovation Skills. I'd just like to ask about the development of cross-book projects. As I understand it, KIC Fund is available for KIC projects for the KICs to do individually, but because of the very close synergies between the pre-KIC teams, there seems to be a great opportunity there to work together, and the critical mass of not just one KIC, but pre-KICs working together.
That's actually a good point, and I had also introduced that before. We were supposed to hear something about it, so we'll come back to you on that. Anyone else? Yes, the gentleman over here, please.
My name is Amit Scherer from Bio Cluster Management from Trinity. I have a question to the ones who are executing regular calls. So who is evaluating the proposals and finally selecting the proposals? Independent external experts or boards which are already within the case?
Have you applied? Did you get it?
No. I've not with a running case now.
So you have not applied?
Just interested for the future.
Okay, if there's anyone here, okay, finally a lady. So even if you haven't applied, I'm very glad for you to say something. Over here. Please introduce yourself.
My name is Paul Slotspeak. I'm from the Institute of Food Research in the UK. You mentioned a little bit about open innovation versus traditional innovation approaches, and I was just wondering, obviously the partners are investing a lot in innovation. What's the ratio, open innovation to like I said, more traditional innovation approaches.
Very good, thank you. I think we take this first round. Again, it wasn't really addressed to anyone in particular. Perhaps, Anna, we start with you because you're so nice and brief. Everyone else in the panel. Go ahead.
Okay, in that case, I will pick the question on who is involved in the selection of proposals. There are within KIC Energy for the innovation project several levels. The first one is at the thematic level, so that's a group of, well, that's a technology field where proposals are screened according to commonly established criteria. And there are external experts involved, consultants, representative of other institutions which are not KIC partners. After those 6 assessments have taken place, it is aggregated at a KIC level for KIC level assessment. In that case, the assessment is then being done by representatives from our industrial partners and the thematic leaders, so that's the person knowledgeable about the technology and also innovation in a given thematic field. And the outcome of that one is a investment proposal to the executive board, which then takes an investment decision.
Oh, that sounds tough. Yeah, I thought so too. Okay, Stan?
Yeah, very similar. We also involve external experts. As I said before, we frame the poll around the what we call action lines, so about 9 different domains in which you can apply for put in let's say proposals. Then those proposals are reviewed by external experts. We have several questions that we ask those experts to address in the proposals. And then based on the outcome, the portfolio is put together that fits also into the overall business plan. So again, there you see a little bit the balance between top-down and bottom-up. You do not want to have, let's say, a collection of just a random project. It has, of course, to fit an overall portfolio. But that is the process. With regard to cross-KIC projects, I think we are involved in a cross-KIC project in energy, where both our KIC and your KIC. But again, the way that we operate is it's independent, so therefore it is not completely obvious from the start if that is the case. But there is some interaction taking place in that area.
Anna, were you aware of this interaction?
Yes, I was the overlaps between different fields of the 3 KICs are apparent in ICT. Well, if you take the example of the smart grid, that's probably the most obvious example where ICT, energy, and climate change, adaptation, mitigation go hand in hand.
Very good. Daniel, can you say something to this ratio of open versus more closed innovation?
Only this one?
No, you can all, as long as you keep to more or less 1 minute.
Okay, no, but quickly also our processes, we are trying to avoid having calls, but the platforms indeed try to shape the challenges that we want to tackle, and so then we try to have more community processes where people meet and exchange and define how to tackle the challenges that have been put in priority by the platforms. Then we have a 2-step process for the ideas first, which are screened by the platforms again for their strategic fit. And then if they go, they can be transformed into full-fledged proposals, which are then assessed by partly external, so we try to have partly external or a great significant part of external experts and also internal, because it's important also to shape the mindset of the people, including inside the community, to know what we expect from the different projects. Regarding the ratio, we need also to be frank there. At the moment, it's still a struggle, and I would say it's not more than 10 to 20% of the activity that can be real open innovation. Although the movement is there and people are willing to find the right model, but we still need to find in Europe, I think, a model that is suitable to the different partners. I think it's probably cultural, and so for me, what we do in the KICs in general is really what Arne said. Is really we reformat the mindset of the people, and so it's a collective effort of changing and trying to define new ways of doing innovations. And actually, the knowledge triangle is a very interesting tool because we have people of different countries, of different cultures who meet with a similar objective and try to really define a new way of doing things together.
I find that quite low. Anna and Stan, just very quickly for your KICs, open versus closed innovation ratio. Just give us a number.
I cannot give a number on the split.
Approximately.
There is no measure. The intention behind the question was whether open innovation works in practice or whether it does not. Then I would like to quote from one major industrial partner where there was a high-level representative that said, it is a situation where we cannot do everything on our own. And that was a motivation to approach KIC Energy. And I would take this as sufficient proof that the offer, the arena which KIC Energy offers with respect to open innovation is bought.
Yeah, we do not collect that information, so we really don't know.
So you have no, and you also don't classify more open. Okay, very good. Alexander.
Well, I'd like to tackle this issue of cross-KIC projects, because from the EIT perspective, it's definitely one area where as a catalyzer of innovation, the EIT can really incentivize this kind of activity. It's quite understandably in the setup stage, in the startup stage of the KICs, it is not likely that the EIT will ask for cross-KIC activities and very intensive cross-KIC activities. But it's definitely one area where we expect in this growing up of the KICs after puberty for the KICs to become involved in cross-KIC activities. And these will likely change the landscape in terms of being impact. And one area where it already manifests the cross-KIC activities in this EIT label. So the EIT label and the way we have this certification of the EIT education program is already one area of across the KICs. I would say across the KICs, not cross-KIC, across the KICs. But another area is outreach. Definitely all KICs are doing outreach activities. But what we would like to see is the 3 KICs involved in really world-class innovation, for instance, in smart cities, where all of them could contribute for smart cities. So just to say, focusing, it's one area where the IT is very much looking forward for the growing up of the KICs. And outreach is definitely, cross-KIC is definitely one area to follow up in the coming 2 to 3 years.
We have to follow a question speaking about the post-puberty life of the KICs. What about a marriage? Could you ever foresee a merger between, because if there is so much overlap and perhaps positive synergy?
We have the 3 CEOs there.
Okay, so that's for the next question.
But let me, the tension between competition and collaboration, it should not be easy. So if you're growing up, you still have a lot to learn on to stabilize, to mature, to professionalize. But if KICs want to marry, why not?
Okay, I'll raise it with the next panel. But there's actually finally a woman on the panel, so we can talk about marriage. Okay, anyone else? Okay, okay, we'll come to you again. Because you asked a nice and provocative question. Well, please introduce yourself for those who maybe have not been in the room before.
Okay, I'm Stuart Anderson from the University of Edinburgh, and I wanted to ask about disruptive innovation strategies and whether you feel the framework that EIT and the KICs give you is free enough to allow you to adopt these kind of strategies, and whether you consciously have adopted them.
You're a revolutionary, you know. Okay, gentlemen up there, please raise your hand and please introduce yourself.
Hi, my name is Shabsar Shikran. I'm from IK4 in Spain. It's a research institute. I was really interested to hear that you do this kind of portfolio management, which is something that I try to do even though we're not a company. But I was just wondering, when you cancel projects, does the dissemination come back to the local region, for example? And maybe it's a bit early to say so now, but you know, if you had like several projects that were cancelled all due to a particular technology line that was pretty old or just not needed for industry, it's somehow got to transfer back to the three, you know, points in the triangle, you know, the education and the business and stuff, so that something changes in the background. I don't know if I've made myself clear. I can.
You understand? I have to say, I'm sorry, I also don't understand it. Can you paraphrase it?
Yeah, sure. Essentially, the KIC is like a company that gives you a market indication of demand, right? I mean, it tells you more or less that there's demand for something. Now, you've got several research lines, or several technology lines. If you cancel projects that all belong to one particular technology line, it more or less says that the technology line is just not needed. Education, universities, research institutes, several of these places, these people don't really have any indication at all to this kind of thing, because most of the time the companies they work with don't tell them that, look, don't work in this area, because as far as they're concerned, this is high-risk research, they're willing to place their bets. So I'm just wondering whether as the KIC, you take an active role in disseminating that information back to the local regions, if that's part of your plan, and then somehow there is some kind of a change in the cycle, the way you do things, or the way the region does things, and changes their core business or their core offer.
Yeah. I see Stan shook his head, so you better answer this one. Anyone else still wants to? Okay, this gentleman over here, please.
Hi, Brian O'Connor, University College Cork, and contrary to what was said earlier, I'm here but not as somebody who wants to set up a new KIC, but somebody who's interested in finding out about how these KICs operate. The question is, the projects that are funded, is it mainly the partners that are involved in these projects, or is it people from outside of the KICs? What's the kind of ratio? How does that work?
Okay, I think we now have three very good questions. I'll come back to all of you for very quickly just responding to this, and then a final round on what your recommendation is for the new KICs. Perhaps we start with you again, Anna, if we may. Please set a good example.
Then I'll take the last question about who participates in the projects. Is it the partners of the KIC, or is it also possible for external organizations to join? As a principle, the partners which are in the KIC activity are those which are necessary to achieve impact. And if they are within the KIC network, very good, improves the excellence of our network. If they are not there yet, they will become part of the network.
Very good, thank you.
Let me start with the disruptive innovation strategy. As I said, we work top-down in setting up a kind of, we call a strategic innovation agenda. We bring that down to what we want to achieve in a particular year. Using that mechanism it means that it is not possible for disruptive ideas to come up. So therefore, we also have a mechanism by which partners could indicate that they have a particular idea that they want to explore, and then we take it outside that round. But that's more an exception than it's the rule, and we have to go through more hoops in order to get into the plan, because otherwise it becomes a kind of very wild environment that is not manageable in achieving the objectives of the KIC. Portfolio management, as I said before, the portfolio management, at least that we are starting to use, in fact it's the first year that we are going to use it, it's really to identify for each and every activity proposal that comes in, and that also the proposers think about the market in which they operate, what they believe the potential of their idea is within that market, so that at least we can work with them and verify if their idea is something that really can shape or change the environment. Now, the question was very much on what do you do with the things that are discontinued. There basically the partners can pick it up, and typically the partners are part of the local community and who take it on and continue with it outside the scope of the KIC. So that's what's happening. Regarding the last questions on partners, indeed we have a partnership of partners, both the what we call core partners, we have associate partners, and we have in the 6 countries that we operate affiliate partners. And then besides that, of course, within the EIT concept, we have the possibility for sub-granting. So that is quite often the way that we involve, let's say, small SMEs in particular activities that are not able to sustain that on themselves.
Very good, thank you. Daniel.
Disruptive innovation, first of all, at the moment, I don't think we have a lot of projects with disruptive innovation, but we know that we are trying to address the important transitions our societies will need to move to a low carbon economy. And so, even if it's not yet in our strategy, we know that we will likely be obliged to go there if we want to induce real changes in our economies and societies. Then the third question, we in general only few partners are not KIC partners, project partners are not KIC partners. What we are trying to do is more to select the partners more at the platform level, so that in order to tackle the challenges that have been identified, we have the right mix of partners. And so there is a partnership development in place that tries to gain the right mix at platform level and not so much for the different projects.
Excellent, thank you so much. Alexander.
Well, from the IT perspective, we hope that in the business model, and particularly in the long term, the KICs would come with disruptive innovation naturally. From the EIT model perspective, the EIT has been granted autonomy and independence and a certain kind of uniqueness in the overall panorama of innovation in Europe to provide autonomy and independence to the KICs to move over this kind of disruptive innovation. So even the models of governance are in the sense of providing independence, autonomy to the KICs to come to these kind of things. So again, this will be likely to happen in the future more than in the current stage, but it's likely it's part of the governance model and the way it is set. The second point, and particularly more about portfolio management, definitely this is a crucial thing. So the heart of partnership is difficult and challenging not only from the IT to the KICs, but from the KIC legal entity to the KIC partners. And the way this portfolio management is conducted and the way over this growing up stage is done, it will be key for the success of the KIC and the sustainability capabilities.
Excellent, thank you so much. In reverse order. Oh, I'm sorry, Anna, you wanted to still say something.
Yes, to answer the last two.
Very quickly.
Okay. On the discarding of technologies. First, the KIC does not provide you with a market need. The KIC supports you in finding a business case, so it does not provide it. That's first. Second one, so far there have been no technology discarded based upon an individual innovation project not being successful. There, we are developing a technology strategy which will focus on certain technology fields. And that will include a decision on where KICs puts its money and where it does not. And that now links to the disruptive innovation question. Does it allow for disruptive innovation? Like any portfolio, yes, that's a certain part of it, not all of it. And then it's a decision on how much disruptive innovation are you going to bet your money on and how much not. And the last one, I don't like to be perceived as the nasty bastard. There is also a positive impact to all this, which means if the time to market makes your business, then the system we apply also allows you for increased funding, so to speed up your development, to be there first and hit the point.
Very good. In reverse order, very quickly, one piece of advice to future KICs. Alexandra, we start with you very quickly.
There's a crucial concept in this impact portfolio management is the sustainability of the KIC. So if you want to be in the long term, then you have to think very carefully on the self-sustainability of the business model. That will be a piece of advice.
Thank you. Daniel.
Yeah, I like very much the idea of having a clear strategy and try to pursue it and be patient, because time is of the essence. You cannot change the mindset of a number of people in a very short period of time, and you need to rely very much also on the community. It's a collective effort. You cannot succeed alone in a KIC. You need to really have a good movement and sharing of the processes and the strategy that is selected.
Excellent, thank you. Stan.
The real focus should be on the preparation of portfolio management, goal management, to make sure that the strategy that you have as a KIC is properly communicated to your partners, that you allow them to work together so that it is not, let's say, all partners coming from the same country with a particular proposal, but that it is really something that is done coherently, and in order to facilitate and orchestrate that, make sure that you have the right tools available to do so.
Very good, thank you. Anna, you have the last word.
I also draw like Alex on the sustainability aspect. Try to find the business case in everything you do, and then what follows from that is a governance structure which supports cashing in on those business cases, communicate the expectations to partners, because that is new for many and it will need a lot of explanation. And when the whole plan faces realities, it forms a part of to rebuild it.
Okay, excellent. This concludes our session on innovative project portfolios, but let's please give a round of applause.